Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I hope you're having a good week. There have been a lot of people who are talking about their surprise at the idea that all of a sudden people who you never thought would be photographed together, much less work together, are suddenly holding hands, smiling together, getting photo ops, and whether we're talking about Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, who are bitter sworn enemies, and Warren goes back to the days of Eddie's father, who is I think slightly older than Frank, when they were banging heads, and then the son comes along in true Shakespearean Hotspur fashion to sort of destroy his old man's nemesis. And it's all very sort of, like I say, Shakespearean Greek tragedy, that sort of thing. Or perhaps, Deontay Wilder suddenly signing with Eddie Hearn, and isn't it amazing? And, Deontay previously describing Joshua as, having a slave contract or something. I forget the exact quotes, but basically when he was completely in bed with PBC and Al Heyman and turning down $110 million to fight Joshua in a 2-fight DAZN deal, suddenly all of that's forgotten. And there they are, smiling together, Eddie and Deontay. Deontay, no less, is the captain of Hearns' team in the 5 versus 5. Isn't this amazing? Isn't it amazing how things can turn around? No, it isn't. And it isn't because it can be summed up with one word. And as you can probably guess, that word is money, right? Did you honestly think that any of these people had any kind of true loyalty, any kind of genuine hatred? Or should we say irreversible hatred? Hatred that couldn't ever be turned around. The hatred was too deep. Of course not. As Mickey Duff famously said, if you want loyalty, buy a dog. And he was talking about boxing. And he was right. He's absolutely right. You throw enough money at people and they will roll over. Most people, certainly when it comes to promoters who no one should ever trust, ever. They may be charming, they may be highly manipulative, they may be, completely convincing in their airtight arguments. Guess what? So are psychopaths. And I'm not saying every single promoter is a psychopath. They're not. Some are. Mentioning no names, Don King. I wouldn't put Warren or Hearn in that bracket, but all they care about is pound signs, dollar signs, any currency signs. They don't care. They just want to make as much money as possible, and they will present it as being, for the good of the game, for the fans, for their clients who are their fighters. When Eddie Hearn gave his Oxford Union address, I thought it was very sort of telling that he spoke about the UFC model and how he ideally would like it in boxing. Why? Because he could control the fighters. The fighters would not control him. Because he could tell them, you're fighting at this time, you're fighting this opponent, and you're fighting at this weight. And there's no negotiations. UFC, of course, is a model that is a complete closed shop. Heyman tried to do it with PBC. It didn't come off, thank God, because it's a horrendous... it's basically a dictatorship. It's like, if you want boxing to resemble or to be an analogy for North Korea, go with that. Go with the UFC model. I don't. And I think it's rather I'm rather delighted that fighters do, to some extent, have an element of controlling their careers, an element of power. But put enough money on the table and they'll kiss some makeup. And I don't think this is the end of it. But let's say that the excellent Turkey decided to pull the plug on the whole boxing endeavour, and suddenly these tens of millions of dollars that are getting thrown around, suddenly they're not there anymore. You think Frank and Eddie are still going to be bosom buddies? They might work together. Now that they've seen what they can do, they might work together. definitely. As Frank sort of joked, half joked maybe, they might gang up on poor old Ben Shalom, I don't know, but do you think most fighters wouldn't go where there's a bigger payday? I mean, in the case of Wilder, you could argue that he didn't, because he was offered that enormous DAZN money, that enormous DAZN 2-fight deal with Joshua when both were undefeated, and he turned it down. I suppose it is feasible sometimes, but Deontay Wilder, I don't know. Is he the brightest bulb in the floodlight? I don't know about that. Yeah, most fighters would go where the money is if they can get out of their contract, and that's why Warren has in the past been a very litigious person. And 10 years ago, when he was hemorrhaging fighters to go over to Matchroom and Sky, while he was trying to put together Box Nation, I mean, Ricky Burns is one that springs to mind. There were others, though. You know, he's banged heads with Calzaghe, with Hatton, and so on. Ben, I think, for a while. Was it Ben? Nigel Ben, not Conor Ben. Yeah, well, it's all about money. So no one should be remotely surprised when this sort of thing happens. If you are, I think you're being a little bit naive. And some people might say, well, you're being a bit cynical, aren't you? Well, I don't think so. It is, after all, called prize fighting. After all, it's called, you know, you're in it to make money. And the old line about athletes dying two deaths, they die the athletic one, then they die the one that we all die, is probably true. You know, you're a long time retired. You want to make as much money as you can. I don't begrudge any fighter making a decent living. And also, I mean, just to sort of touch briefly upon it, this is probably a subject for a different video. A few people have said, well, there was a lot of outrage when, you know, the excellent Turkey stepped up about Saudi, you know, sports washing and so on. There's no doubt that exists. I mean, everything I've said on the subject, I stand by. But if you're on a boxing channel, what am I going to do? Am I going to not do videos? Are we, as so-called content creators, are we not going to cover anything that we morally don't agree with? Jesus Christ, I'd hardly make any boxing videos, because I'll tell you now, I can't think of a single promoter that I've really got, that certainly can't think of one that I would trust, and there isn't a single one that I would particularly, you know, sing the praises of. I mean, in a promotional sense, yes, but in a moral sense, certainly not. You know, even Don King put on fantastic cards. I mean, brilliant cards, but he really was a psychopath. Or should I say, as my friend Pat Brown always says, criminal profiler, she always says, he displays all the traits of a psychopath. Don't ever call him a psychopath, because they can sue. Okay. In that case, yeah. All right, anyway, if you've got any thoughts on this, leave them below. It's all about money at the end of the day. That don't mean to say we can't have a bit of fun with it. I'm looking forward to the Bivol Baturviev fight and the undercard, brilliant undercard. Let's just enjoy it, eh? Let's just enjoy it while it lasts. All right, comments below if you've got any. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Please hit the like button and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. I'd really appreciate that. And as always, I do appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Catch you later. Bye for now.